right from the beginning, we've been working to optimize this feature in RX. With version 7 and Repair Assistant, it works better than ever. So let's do the same thing again. Click Start Over so we have a clean slate. Music mode, Start Analysis. Now, Repair Assistant always analyzes for these same 4 audio problems. In the Preferences menu, if you know that you don't need it to look for hum, for example, you can deselect that and it'll focus on the other 3 issues. So, we are given 3 processing suggestions again. Once more, mouth declick and dehum for option A. Processing chain B, declick and dehum. We're going to have pretty similar results for all 3, but it's good to have a couple options to choose from. So we'll listen to suggestion A. All right, so that's pretty good. I still hear some crackles and clicks in there. Let's listen to B instead. All right, so to my ear, B is a little bit closer, but I'm still picking up on some of those crackles that we're trying to get rid of. I think it needs a little bit more processing than RX recommended. Luckily, if you click this slider icon here, RX works for a second and then creates an intensity slider for us. What you see here is in the middle. This is how you would obviously adjust the processing chain intensity. The middle is the suggestion that RX made to begin with. If you make it less intense, it'll be removing less audio content from your file. If you drag it to the right, the processing is going to be more intense, removing more content from your audio file. Click Render to commit this change to audio, and we should be able to see a change occur here in the spectrogram. You can see it thinned out this frequency at around 1.5K, and then some of the higher end frequency here. Let's take a listen, and what I'm hoping is that we'll get rid of the crackles and clicks, but it's still going to have the character of an aged vintage recording. And like magic, that's exactly what happened. So, RX has always been a wizard at restoring vinyl recordings, and it's better than it's ever been with Repair Assistant. Now, who among you records vocalists or works with vocals? Yep, lots of people. So this is probably going to be a pretty relatable issue. There are a lot of times when you have a vocalist in a vocal booth in a studio. The settings are all great. It's acoustically treated. They have studio headphones on with a click track, and you know what's going on already. The click track is so loud in the headphones that it bleeds into the microphone the vocalist is using to perform. That can be a super annoying problem, but one that is now very easily corrected with RX-7. So again, this is another instance where trade show environment is working against us. It's tough to hear the metronome embedded in this audio file, but if you look visually right here, there's that vertical perforated line. That is one instance of the clicks, and it occurs periodically, evenly throughout this track. So let's take a listen.
The sunrise sheds light on and tears up and dies. We sway to the rhythm, our gaze toward the skies.
All right, and just to confirm that there are clicks in this track, I'm going to turn the volume up here just on this click. So that's definitely an electronic metronome. Luckily, we also have a recording of the click track itself, and as long as you have the performance recording and the bleed source, you can use RX's de-bleed module to remove only that bled click track. So I'll show you how that's done now. You select the audio file of the vocal performance in this case, and we're going to open up de-bleed. Under active track, we see that this is the vocal recording. That's what we want. This drop-down menu shows every audio file that's currently open in RX, and we're going to go here and grab the click track, which is the source of the bleed. Once we've done that, we click Learn. RX is now learning the relationship between the recording of the performance and the content that has bled into it. That's going to help it identify what you're trying to remove, and get rid of it in the most transparent way possible. Just to confirm, looking at the active track, we see the spectrogram for the vocal performance, and the bleed source is very clearly the click track. Another thing to mention is I'm not messing with these settings too much. These modules are designed so that the default settings when you open them up are usually up to the task of repairing most audio jobs, or most audio problems. So I'm gonna click render, and I would pay close attention to this perforated line there to confirm that the clicks are being removed. All right, and as the spectrogram updates, you can see this click at the end was removed, so we should just have that nice vocal that I've heard a million times.
The sunrise sheds light on and tis up and dies. We sway to the rhythm, our gaze toward the skies.
All right, and so that click is clearly gone. We could turn this up as loud as we want to, but we're going to be considerate of everyone else and not do that. That is as simple as it can be to remove bled content. But let's say that you have a recording with content that bled into it, but you do not have access to a recording of the isolated bleed source. There are still ways we can work around that. So in this example, we have a vocalist who's playing acoustic guitar, and this is the recording from the vocal mic. Unfortunately, the acoustic guitar has bled into the vocal mic, and we do not have a recording of the isolated acoustic. So we'll take a listen, and you'll hear right away that there is prominent acoustic guitar playing under the vocal.
Sleep, talk about the weather, whether it'll get any worse. That's the ideal distraction when you know you are dying of thirst. Well, I've been.
All right, so there's a guitar in there that we're going to want to remove. I'm going to select just part of this clip so that we can hear the before and after difference when I perform this processing. We're going to dive into another really cool feature that's brand new to RX-7, and that's music rebalance. This is pretty groundbreaking source separation material. What it does is it allows RX-7 to look at your audio file. It identifies which spectral content is the voice, the bass, the percussion, or other musical instruments. From there, you have very simple gain sliders to adjust the levels without needing all the individual stems. So again, in this case, we're trying to isolate this vocal and get the acoustic guitar out of there. To do that, I'm going to bring everything except the voice meter all the way down. I'm going to turn the sensitivity up a little bit so that RX is going to work a little bit harder at separating the various musical elements. That should give us a really clean vocal, remove the acoustic guitar, and again, we don't want it to be audible that there was ever anything there to be removed in the first place. So we'll render that out, and once the render is complete, I'll play the file from the beginning so that this first section should have no acoustic guitar in it, and then starting here, the acoustic guitar returns.
Sleep, talk about the weather, whether it'll get any worse. That's the ideal distraction when you know you are dying of thirst. Well, I've been crushed before. I used to be 6
Right,
foot
and then the guitar comes
never
back
on
in.
a side.
So there are a couple frequencies here that I would probably do some micro editing on just to complete and make sure it's a totally clean vocal. But as you can see, Music Rebalance does a great job of helping you control the levels of individual musical elements. Right? Moving right along. Now, this is a hip-hop verse that we have recorded, and unfortunately, we've ended up with a number of audio issues. So I'm going to play it start to finish, and then point out the specific things we're looking to correct.
Ever seen a rapper try to pay his way through college, buying food and all your books? What have you broke by next deposit? Refund check that go to travel, refund checks that's in your closet, and I need a refund check if you ever flaked on a solid.
All right, so a couple things jump out to me there. The first is there are a couple entities we call plosives. That's a burst of low-end energy that comes from consonant sounds like B and P. One part of it that really jumped out to me is the word book, which I think is right here.
The books what happened. Have you broke
Yep.
the books? What have you?
And if you look at the spectrogram display, there's some pretty extreme low-mid energy right there. The second thing is around 9 seconds, the vocalist takes a pretty deep breath that it's not the end of the world to have that, but I would prefer that it's quieter than the rest of the lyrics so that it's a more focused listening experience. I'll play that right
That
here.
go to travel. Refund checks. That's
So it's just that little gasp of air that I would prefer it to be a little bit quieter. And then the only remaining issue that I heard is the presence of sibilants. That's piercing, kind of scraping higher frequencies that come from consonant sounds like S and Ch, things like that. They can be really bitey on big sound systems. So we're going to take care of all those things one at a time, and it's going to take a surprisingly short amount of time. So the first module we're going to open up is De-Plosive. Again, this is designed to remove those low-end bursts from consonant sounds like P and B. Again, just default settings. Going to click render, and you're usually left with a pretty good result. Visually, you can see that a lot of low-end content was removed from there. We'll take a listen to the problematic area from before.
wait through college buying food and all your books. What have you? Broke by next deposit. Refund check that.
Right? So it did not remove the consonant sound altogether, which isn't what we wanted. That it would sound completely unnatural if the beginning of all those words were removed, but it helps you control those frequencies so that you're going to have a better time mixing it moving forward. Next, I want to remove the breath from around 9 seconds.
Go to travel. Refund.
That quick little gasp of air. Now, I don't want to completely remove it because that will give the recording a sort of synthetic sound, and you want to be reminded that you're listening to a real human. So we're going to do a very modest gain reduction here. And to confirm that I'm isolating just the breath, I'm going to click Output Breaths Only, and then we'll preview the processing. The goal is that we will only hear the sharp intake of air. If we hear other content, we know that the settings are too extreme.
Refund check that go to. Refund checks that sing. Refund check that go to. Refund checks.
Yep, so in the selected area, it is only detecting that breath. So again, just a little bit of attenuation. We'll click render. Whoa, a classic mistake. I did not uncheck output breaths only. Everybody who's used RX has done that. Let's try it again, and there we go. That space right there is where the breath was before.
Refund check that go to travel. Refund checks that's in your closet.
And you can hear it. The breath is still there. It's not gone altogether, but it's a lot more manageable. Last thing to do is address those sibilants, and we're going to use DS to do it. This is another one of RX's oldest modules. It's been around for a number of versions, I think maybe as far back as 2 or even the first one. But this module is trained to identify those specific frequencies that are really unpleasant to human ears that come from S sounds. So similar to breath control, I'm going to check out output S only to make sure that our settings are appropriate. All right, and so that sounds good to me. Again, if we were hearing anything other than those sibilant sounds, we would know that we want to use more conservative settings because we're not trying to remove any vowel content from the recording. So let's hit render and then take a listen to our nice, clean hip-hop vocal.
Ever seen a rapper try to pay his way through college buying food and all your books? What have you? Broke by next deposit. Refund check that go to travel. Refund checks that's in your closet. And I need a refund check if you ever flaked on a solid.
All right, so I am pleased with this. We've removed those issues, and it's clean recording. You can continue mixing now. Moving right along, we have a...
Spectral de-esser.
The spectral de-esser, that requires more processing power, which for the purposes of a demo can mean longer loading time. But that's a great point. The spectral algorithm is more exacting and more precise. So if you have more time to get the best possible result, spectral is the way to go. A lot of times the default mode is sufficient though. So now we're going to take a look at this nice acoustic guitar recording, or electric guitar. And so something that I hear going on is you hear the squeak of the player changing position on the fretboard. Again, that's not something I want to remove altogether because I like the human element in the recording, but we can make it a little less pronounced so it's less distracting, and therefore it's not going to negatively influence your mix down the road. So we'll take a quick listen to just the selection. All right, everyone hear that fret squeaking? Now this is another good job for Spectral Repair. I'm going to switch it to the spectrogram view. I find that a lot easier whenever I'm using Spectral Repair. And I'm going to select the area that I can visually tell is the string squeak. Open up Spectral Repair once again. And I'm going to make sure multi-resolution is selected. That is, it's going to make sure that the effect is a lot more, it's more surgical, it's more exact. We're going to totally remove that sound in the most transparent way we can. We're going to keep it on vertical interpolation so that, again, RX is going to look in the space of the audio file above and below your selection, and you source that content to fill in the hole from the sound we're removing. So let's see what kind of results we get here. Again, we don't want to completely remove the fret sound, but we want it to be a little quieter compared to the actual guitar performance. Now that we've removed that, we'll take a listen to this section. All right, so we've made that shift in the player's position a lot more subtle. It's still there, so you can tell that you're listening to a real person, but it's not going to get in the way of what they're actually playing. So this is good. We like this. We are moving on. All right, so we're going to go back to music rebalance, and I'm going to show you some pretty cool applications for that. In this example, we have what the mix engineer considered a finished mix, but I don't think I'm going to like the balance of it. All right, so right there, the drums are kind of overpowering the vocal. It's getting swallowed up a little bit. So I'm going to make a selection and return to music rebalance. As we saw before, you can use these sliders to configure the gain setting for each of your musical elements. I'm going to bump the voice up a bit because she's getting a little lost in the mix, and then pull the percussion down. Now, I'm doing this to a selection in the middle of the audio file, so that when we play it from the beginning, the first bit will be the original mix, and then after that, the percussion should be a little lower and the vocal's going to be a little higher. Let's check that out now. All right, and here's after. All right. So you can play with it to taste. I think the percussion is a little too low at this point, but you can see that RX is very good at identifying the voice, the percussion, and separating those, attenuating those independently of one another. So that's it's a really great tool if you find yourself in a situation where you need to make adjustments to a mix, but you don't have access to the individual stems.